What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 35. What to do with my life battling existential despair. I'm Randy
Woo!
with my buddy Danny. How's it going,
Hey,
Danny?
Randy.
Hi, Danny. So, this episode is something that I struggle with on a regular basis, and I just heard another friend struggling with it this week. So, I was like, hey, let's do an episode on this. What should I do
I
with my
mean,
life?
yeah, it's a good idea. I feel like we all struggle with this. I feel like I struggle with this literally every fucking day.
Yeah. Yeah. And battling the whole existential despair. I mean, like, I think nowadays there's a lot of pressure on us to live this monumental life.
Oh,
You
dude,
know,
there's an insane amount of pressure. Yeah.
everyone feels they need to be an Elon Musk or a Teddy Roosevelt or an Abraham Lincoln or a whoever. Whereas, like, back in the day, it was just like, yeah, I farm a field and then I have an alcohol problem. That's my life.
I wonder too, because like back in the day, you had like, you always have like exemplary figures, like, you have Jesuses and you have your Siddharthas and stuff in history. And then you always had your elites, like in the Roman aristocracy and stuff. But there was like, back then, there was that idea of like born into it and like having the blood for it and stuff where like so most people the idea that you could do that just wasn't a question. Like you couldn't. It was pretty much out of the question, right? There might be instances where someone rises from slavery or something into a prominent position, and we see that with the Stoics and stuff, but it's not so common. But I think nowadays too, with social media and everything, with the internet, with the news, we see so many examples of it. And even though there are very few, you're still talking about what, like 0.00000 something percent of the total population. It seems like it's common. And I think that is also
Yeah,
part of the problem, right? Like,
I like
yeah,
that. I like that point because, like you were saying, back in the day, it would never even cross your mind. You would just be like, nope, I was born a plebe. I'll stay a plebe the rest of my life. Whereas nowadays, there's this whole mentality like, if you don't have the life you want, it's your fault. There's something wrong with you. You're not trying hard enough. You're not hustling hard enough. You just don't want it enough. What's wrong with you?
yeah. It's funny too. You ever read Plato's Republic?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody knows of the philosopher kings, right? The rulers or whatever that he suggests should rule the city in this like ideal city they set up. But what people often forget is part of being a philosopher ruler is what he calls the noble lie. And it was basically the lie was creating this mythology, this story to explain people's classes to them. So they felt basically proud to be in that class and didn't feel a need to go beyond what they were capable of or what they should do. So like the people that are farming won't want to be anything but farmers. The people that are protecting the city won't want to be anything but protectors. And they have this nice story to explain it that makes their life bearable. And that goes back to like with interpretation, right? And understanding our existence, making sense of it, and then being able to like deal with it. And I think it's an interesting idea because like, if you have these stories, that kind of helps you make sense of your reality, right?
Yeah, well, it kind of takes away that whole existential despair if you have a story, if you have like a community that you're part of. Like I think we've lost a lot of that in the past 50, 100 years, whatever it is, knowing where we belong. And because we don't know where we belong, and because theoretically we can be anywhere, it just makes it a lot more difficult.
Oh, it does. Think about the ability to move around now. Like, 50, 60 even years ago, you wouldn't have been able to move. So I guess you can move around, but it wouldn't have been as easy, I don't think, as it is now, probably. And like 150 years ago, you just couldn't. You couldn't fly wherever you want. You couldn't just, and so you were more limited. And so maybe there was a greater sense of community, and that's part of it. Because I think that has been lost to a point, people even talk about that with like, if you talk to people about like people that have like left religious practice, like the number one thing they usually miss is the sense of community, right? The traditions, the practices, the regularity, and like, that group that you're a part of, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. So that leads to the question, what should I do with my life?
I don't know.
Okay. So here's
Yeah.
so my friend asked me this question, and
He
I
asked you, what should I do
actually
with my life?
yeah, and I actually
Okay.
recommended this it's a Gary Vaynerchuk video where he's talking about how, you know, everybody wants to like be something so early in life, you know, like in our 20s and in our 30s and in our 40s, even like everybody wants to prove themselves so early. And he's just saying, be patient. Like it's not a short game. Have like a 50-year mentality. And we talk about this a lot. I bring up the Steve Martin example with his banjo
Yeah.
playing, how people asked him, you know, how'd you become a good banjo player? And he's like, well, I figured if I stuck with it for 40 years, I'd be good. So I just kept on practicing. And I think that is somewhat helpful because everybody wants to figure out what to do with their life right now. Like, what happens if it's not even up to you to figure out what to do with your life? What happens if it's just something that's handed to you, but you just have to be patient enough to wait around for that to be handed to you?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking about that the other day. Like, you know, we can only control so much. So there's a lot of out of our control, and all that stuff also plays a part in what we're able to do, right? I mean, in the opportunities that present themselves to us and what we can take advantage of. And it's like, you know, up to a certain point, it's also like, you know, you can do all you want, you still might not get it. And I think that's also part of patience too, is understanding, you know, how it sort of plays out and whether or not it will happen. But is it worthwhile to try for, right? Is it worthwhile to make an effort? I remember that book we were reading, what was it? Martha Beck. I think one of the things I liked that she said was when she talked about like your understanding, paying attention to your physiology. So understanding like your energy levels, your emotional responses to things, and using that as sort of a guide to help you get to where you should be. Like if I know that like I'm doing something and I always feel tired doing it, I always feel exhausted, maybe it's probably not right for me, right? It's probably something that inside I'm reacting to in a way, even though rationally I'm trying to override that and say, no, I still want to do this, right? Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I've been even thinking about this a lot with myself. Like right now, I'm living this life that I've dreamed of for a long time, and it's not giving me the things that I thought I would get from it. You know, it's more
Well, I mean,
challenging. You
yeah,
know,
but it's
it's
also
more.
like in pandemic.
Yeah, but the whole world's going through that. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and so yeah, so it's kind of like I wonder about this stuff too. And it makes me think like maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I'm expecting too much from life. But then there's that whole argument that like you need to work towards the life that you want. Anything you want is possible. So I'm just kind of caught in this conundrum right now.
Oh, dude, I'm always there. And you know what I hate about it too? It's like it's this idea that like you're gonna find this thing and everything's gonna be so great, and you're gonna have so much energy, and you're gonna stay up every night to do it. And it's like that is true sometimes. Sometimes you'll find that. But no matter what you find, that's not going to hold all the time. It's impossible. One, you wouldn't make it. You burn yourself out in like 2 weeks.
Mhm.
But two, it just isn't realistic. And I think this is the problem of like balancing, like on the one hand, like what does it mean to find what I want? I think that's the difficult question, right? Like, what am I expecting? What does it look like? Because I think we don't
That's
actually know, you
Well,
know?
that's
Yeah.
a really good point because when we're looking at it, or at least when I'm looking at it as a destination as opposed to a journey. And so I'm expecting this destination to be like, once I have that, then it's going to be this thing stuck in time and it'll be perfect. And then I'll be at this perfect destination forever. And I'm forgetting that it's the journey that's important and that really each waypoint we get to is just a little bit further along in the journey. So it's kind of like choosing what journey do we actually want.
That's a good way to look at it. You know, it's funny too, because it really points out the fact too that like we all make these mistakes so often. It's like even when you know, like even when
It's
you're well
comical.
aware,
It's
yeah,
comical.
it is. It's like it's cosmically funny, right? It's like, you know, the universe is laughing at us constantly because we're just idiots. We constantly forget our perspective. We constantly forget all the things that we know that should really help us and should make it easier to deal with the journey and all the things that we have to deal with day to day. And yet it's like we almost all the time like throw that out and just like it should be perfect right now. It's just not gonna be. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I think sometimes too, when you think of the journey, I think it's the journey's helpful because you can think of it in terms of like a progressive development. So like I can look in the past year and say, I'm doing much better now. So that's good. right? I mean, like that is that is good. If I look in my past in a year, I know I'm doing way better now. That's awesome. But if I just look at now and I focus on now and I think about what I want and the life I want, then I start to get let down because I'm not 10 years ahead of where I should be. You know what I mean? Or something like that, where that's going to take 10 years time to get there, unfortunately. So it's like, you know,
Yeah,
that time is a bitch.
yeah, and yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's kind of like we have to learn to enjoy what we're in now. So one question that I've been asking myself, because I like to look at my mind as like this ultra computer that can answer any question that I ask it. So I've just been asking myself regularly, how can I enjoy the process, or how can I enjoy the journey better?
Yeah,
Because
okay.
it's just
Yeah.
a constant journey. No matter how often I think it's going to be a destination, like I keep fooling myself into thinking that it's a destination. But no matter how many times I think that, it's never going to be a destination until I'm dead. That's the only destination, really. So it's just going to be a journey. So I need to figure out, how can I better enjoy the journey?
And watch, even death won't be a destination. There'll be some
Yeah,
bullshit
right.
after that I gotta deal with. No. Yeah, it's funny. You know, it's funny because I was thinking about this yesterday. Because yesterday I got in this like mood and like it happens sometimes, and like everything felt flat. Does that make sense? Like where
Oh
like
yeah, I've been there a million times. Yeah.
yeah, we're like all of a sudden like everything I would be interested in or the project I was working on, like everything just all of a sudden just seemed like bleh. Like I don't want to do any of this. This sucks. I'm tired of this. And it's like I know when that happens, I have to pull myself out of it by usually just doing something else and letting it go for a day because it's probably usually the best medicine for me at least. And I think like those little tricks are important because they can help us like kind of like reset a little bit, come to it with a new perspective a little bit, or like or the old perspective that works, I guess. But yeah, trying to enjoy the day to day and the journey is a challenge, I think, for most of us, because part of that is also what you're asking people to do is try to find enjoyment in the struggle. And that's often the thing that we don't find enjoyable, right? It's hard. You have bills to pay. You're trying to make things better. You're trying to get out of debt. You're trying to get to a point where you can do the things that you want. And it's like, and you don't want to so hyper focus on that you forget to do things that you want to do in the interim because then you're not enjoying life. But at the same time, it's like, it's this constant, I think, struggle, right? Between like trying to enjoy the difficulties of life and life itself, and also trying to get to that place where you imagine, like you said, a destination that you imagine this perfect place and all, but in reality, it's not going to be that. It's just going to be
Yeah.
more of the same with other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Like right now, I'm re-listening to Atomic Habits, and one of the things that he talked about in there that I really liked is that we have such a higher capacity for wanting something than we do for actually enjoying it. And and it's the same thing with this journey destination paradox we get stuck in. We're like, the journey is the wanting it, and we're able to want it so much more. But once we get it, we don't have that capability for enjoying it. So while I was listening to that, I started thinking about, well, how can I actually enjoy this journey of wanting and not having? Because I have a much higher natural capability for doing so. How can I actually enjoy that part more than not having? Because I think we can get kind of lost in fantasy, and like I actually think we quite enjoy fantasizing about this stuff, like daydreaming about it, and just,
Oh yeah,
oh, it's going to be like this, and it's going to be like that, and it's going to be like that. And actually, they in the book he talks about gamblers, how gamblers, the anticipation of winning releases more dopamine than
yeah.
winning.
Yeah, I was just
And
gonna actually say that I had read something somewhere that for like when like the Mega Millions hits like $1 billion or something, and pretty much tons of people will play. Like that's why it climbs so high, especially when you get to those higher numbers. And I was reading something that they said like most people, they get this huge amount of enjoyment from just imagining what they would do with the money. Literally like imagining that like this dramatic change in life, like here's $1 billion, yay, all right. And then you just imagine like I would buy 5 houses and I would do all these whatever things you would imagine. I don't know what they are, but apparently that part of it like makes it worthwhile, just like the gambler, right? Who the anticipation is, that's the high that they're looking for. It's not necessarily, that's why they stay after they win, right? And end up losing more money because they want that anticipation again, that idea of maybe winning even more, and that sort of excitement of it, which is interesting.
Hmm. And so maybe recognizing those moments when I'm like fantasizing about this stuff and actually enjoying that more, like looking at that as kind of one of the small delights, being like, "Ooh, I
Yeah.
really did enjoy looking forward to that." Because then when I actually get the thing, it's kind of like anticlimactic. Like I look
Right.
around and I look at how blessed my life has been, and I have like I literally have all the stuff that I could ever want, and it's just like now that I have it, it's just like a thing, it's just a doodad I had over here. Whereas like the wanting and the fantasy, that's the stuff to really enjoy.
Well, I think part of it too is we have a tendency. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, an unrelated thing, which is weird, but who knows what's going to be relevant, right? I was thinking about, like we want we have the capacity to want lots of things, right? I'll just think about an object for now. Imagine you want something like whatever it is, X, say whatever the hell it is. And I was thinking about it the other day, like we have a tendency to want like all these things at once, like people online shopping, like fill their basket with like a million things that they want, later down the road or whatever. And then they get them and it's like anticlimactic. And I think part of it is also like focusing your wants on specific things and trying to limit them so that when you do get those things, they're actually things that you really do want and will use and get enjoyment out of beyond just the acquisition of the object. I think that there is something to that. Like for instance, like if you have a hobby or something, like I'll use photography as an example. I love photography; it's a great hobby, and like now it's a hobby, so it's not something I do professionally. So I don't spend a ton of money on things for it. But like there's a new lens that I want, and I know I'll wait to get it until I can afford it and all. But when I get it, I know I'll use it a ton, and I'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And there'll be an immediate, obviously, like yay burst of excitement, obviously, but like it's that long-term use of it. And I think that long-term engagement with that's also important. That helps us sort of maybe reconcile that difference between like the wanting and the actual having and the pleasures we get from them.
Yeah, yeah, because you can just look at it like how many times have you gone to Amazon late night, filled up a cart, bought it, and then when the package arrives the next day or 2 days later, you don't even remember what it is.
People do that all the time. It is funny. Just
Yeah.
like a bunch of junk that you don't need.
Yep. Yeah. So
Yeah.
now that we're off topic, what should I do with
Yeah.
my life? Danny, come on, help.
I don't know, right? Yeah, I think this is it though, right? It's like I think this is the problem with, this is the whole existential despair in general, right? Is this issue that if we look at life and we know that we're going to die, that puts a certain pressure on us to live, right? But then with that pressure to live comes the pressure of doing what's right for us. And I think all of this builds up to a lot. It builds up to a lot of pressure to do the right thing. And there's this, Kierkegaard, I think it was, talked about like the anxiety of choice. That, when you really look at a choice, even like little choices, there's this anxiety that I can do one thing or the other, right? And when I choose one or the other, I've chosen a path effectively. I've canceled out the other one. And so there is this like, when you really get into existentialism, there's this very deep like sense in which choices become so hard and so important because you have to really spend a lot of time on them. And I think we don't do that normally. We blow through a lot of things, right? We just make fast choices, do all this, and then we end up waking up 2 weeks later and we're in a life, right? And I think that's part of it maybe too, is like living the life you want is also being way more intentional than we usually are, way more careful in our thinking, our planning, and our choice making, so that what we're doing is consistent with who we are, not just random amalgamation of choices that add up to some sort of life, right? And then we find ourselves there.
Yeah, that's a good. I definitely like that because I noticed that as I got older that opportunities would come up and I'd have to say no to them because I knew that if I said yes to them, I'd have to commit to doing all that work, and I knew I wasn't up for that work. So, definitely seeing the either or of the choices. But something that just came up for me was there it went.
It happens. Don't worry about it. Wait, here to further that example too.
We're definitely getting older.
I know we are, right? It happens. You forget shit all the time. It's okay. I noticed that with getting older too, though, right? A greater concern too, kind of for living the way you want, and less concern for how others look at you and for other people's opinions. I think that's great. That's important, and I think that's just something that comes with age. You start to realize that it just doesn't fucking matter, right? Like what these other people think and all. But I think part of it too is like, you know, you've said it time and again, I think on the podcast, right? Like you wanted to be a vet, and you thought when you were a vet, things would be good, right? You made this connection between like a destination of being vet and happy life. But it turned out not to be the case, obviously, because you're not doing that
Hmm.
still. But what's funny is I think when we do that, part of what we're doing is it's not that we're making necessarily a bad decision, but we're forgetting all the intermediary steps and all the work on ourselves that has to take place in that process too, and the choices we're making. Because it's not just like, because you can become a vet in a lot of different ways. You can do a lot of different things. And I think, and in the process, maybe you would have realized that it wasn't right for you or something. If you were thinking very carefully, maybe, or thinking more about it and the choices you were making, instead of just looking at the end and trying to get there. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
I think that's
Definitely.
maybe a lot of what we do that kind of throws us off of living the life we want or the life that's right for us.
Yeah. And also it came back to me with what should I do with my life? Maybe the answer to that is exactly what you're doing right now. Like I remember it was in not the Power of Now, but I think the New Earth or something, one of the Eckhart Tolle books. He was talking about like
Oh,
how the most important thing, like everybody wants to know what they should do with their life, and it's really just what you're doing right now. That's the most important thing. And then you can work towards whatever you want, but like put all of your effort and energy into what you're doing right now. And I need to constantly remind myself that every day because I'm just like I'm so future focused that I oftentimes am not able to live in the present. So, like I keep having these fantasies of these destinations that I get to, and that's the end goal. And so I'm always fantasizing about these destinations that I'm at so much that I'm not even realizing that this where I am right now used to be one of those fantasies.
well, I think that's the major issue for all of us, right? We're so future oriented. We stress so much about the future. We spend so much time imagining the future, worrying about it, right? Freaking out about it, that we actually aren't living in the present. And so we're missing all of this stuff. We're missing all those opportunities to kind of carefully steer our life in that right direction. And I think that's part of it, like just focusing. And people always talk about the importance of planning, right? If you just focus on the end and don't care how you get there, you'll get the end result. You'll get there. But but who you are may not have changed, or you might not have done important things that would have helped you get there in the right way, right? You know, it's like forgetting to it's like choosing a college but forgetting about geography, like where it's located, forgetting about the culture of the college, forgetting about all these other factors that might make your educational experience enjoyable, right? It's like you forgot all that other crap because you're just focused on one thing. And I think that's one thing that we all struggle with, is like it's hard to live life and think about the day to day as important as the future. It is very difficult, I think, to think that way, where the present becomes as, if not more important than those end goals we're trying to achieve. Because in the end,
Yeah.
maybe
So
it doesn't matter if we get those ends even. I don't know if it does, right? If you're
well,
focused in the
I
right
mean,
way.
I always like the saying that the goal doesn't matter as much as who you become in achieving that goal. I think that's such an important philosophy because like attaining goals is one thing, but it's like you can have the world and lose yourself in doing it. And is that's not really worthwhile. Like I want to achieve my goals, but I want to be the best person I can be in doing so and actually be a better person because I've gotten there. And then the cool thing about doing it that way is that if you get there, like let's say you get there and then you lose it, guess what? You have what it takes to get it again.
Well, exactly, right. And I think the other thing too is if you focus on yourself, you're also building yourself in the process, becoming who I think maybe that's part of it. It's not that we should think about um what life is right for me, but what type of person should I be? Maybe that's a better way to kind of frame the question, right? Not what end should I pursue, but who am I? And how do I become the person I want to become? Because the ends can be interchangeable sometimes or can be swapped out. Or even if I say fail to get one goal, like you said, right? I have all those skills, I have all those abilities, I can just do something else or do something similar, probably because I already could do it, right? So it's not like that's impossible. But that's always a
Mm-hmm.
difficult thing, man. Working on ourselves is not easy either. That is.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I actually just read a quote for the first time today from Henry Ford. I'm going to butcher the quote, so obviously,
That's right.
I'm
Go
just
for
paraphrasing.
it.
But he was
Not
saying
verbatim.
something. Yeah, he was saying something along the lines: if you're looking at money for security or fulfillment or something like that, you're lost. Really, the only thing you should look for is knowledge, experience, and something else. But
Those
it
two
was
are
it
good.
was it was really good because this is coming. He was like the Elon Musk of that time. He
Yeah.
was probably one of the richest men of that time. What he was like a baron, like just in terms of wealth and power and everything like that. And he was saying, "Hey, money isn't it." And you hear this over and over and over and over again. Like Jim Carrey says, he wishes that everybody could have all the money and success and fame that they wanted, so they could realize that's not it. And so we hear it over and over again, and yet everybody's like, "I know it's not money, but I still want to find out." And yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's hard about that. I think that, I think it's two things, right? One, you're
it's only
constantly,
rich people who are telling us it's not money.
yeah,
There's something up with
right. Something up with that. No, but I think it's true, right? Because I mean, you can just look at every wealthy person, and if you really look at their problems, you realize that the money's not solving everything. It can't. It's impossible. But I think it's two. I think we're throwing those images so often as ideals that most of us think just, that would be great to have all that money anyway. And we think somehow it would make us happy, even though it didn't make them happy. And the other side of it too is I think a lot of people that are struggling and have debt and all, like they miss, they, they sort of, because of that pressure and stress now, they assume that the money would solve all their problems because it would solve all their immediate stresses, right? And their security issues and food issues and things like that, which is great. But at a certain point, it doesn't do everything, right? You still have to live your life. I think that's what people forget. Like you're still alive, you're still a person, you still have to do stuff. So it's like, at a certain point, yeah, it's not going to solve all your problems.
Mm-mm.
And you can get caught up in that just as much as anything else where you lose yourself, right? You focus on wealth and stuff, and you can get caught up in a system where you just totally forget yourself and who you are, and then you're lost again just as much as anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if we had to give some people some tips, like suppose there's somebody out there who's listening to this amazing podcast, and or they're
It's
watching
pretty
it on
great.
YouTube,
One or
whichever
two.
they're
Yeah.
doing. Maybe they're about to click the subscribe button, or they're about to share it or like it with a friend, anything that they're about to do right now. Well, let's say
Very
that
nice.
they're let's just say that they're saying, well, so what should I do with my life? They're so confused. Like they're like, I'm I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know this. I don't know that. Let's come up with like some helpful, handy tips and hints for them. Like,
I think, yeah,
yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I was going to say, I think one of the most important things to remember is I think that pretty much everyone you come in contact with is struggling with this. So I think it's important not to feel like you're isolated and not to feel like you're alone in this struggle. I think most of us struggle with this. And I think most intelligent people struggle with this a lot because it's like this idea of, what is the right life and finding that balance and finding out who we are is not easy. And I think with that too, I think sometimes, like there's lots of simple things you can do that can help. Like, writing down like, what are some things you love or what are some things that you're just good at naturally. Those are usually good places to start, I think, for at least helping you kind of maybe find some things that are right for you. But it's not going to ever be a universal, you know, problem solver finding those things, right? But I think those things are a great way to kind of get started. Like if you're great at art and you're good at art. Okay, so what can you do with art, right? If you really love it, if you're good at it, if you have a natural ability, good. What can you do with it? That might be at least a starting point, something to get you going. And that could even be just creativity, which can be translated into anything, right? I mean, so it's like you got to look at these things, I think, and look to like what can I actually do with them? And I think also too, really important is we have to work on ourselves. I think if we don't do that, if we don't become a good person in the sense in which we think a good person should be, if we don't develop ourselves, it doesn't matter what we get externally, it means nothing. And I really do believe that because I've seen that in my life, I've seen it in a lot of other people's lives. Like you have to live a life that's right for you. And that in part means personal development, right? And character development, which is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some really good suggestions. I would like to add to that, and I would like to say, um, first thing is, it always seems like we're in such a hurry to change ourselves and improve ourselves when we're in a bad mood or when things
Yeah.
aren't
Oh
going
God.
well,
Yeah.
you know, which is
Yeah.
probably one of the worst times to be doing it because you're grasping straws, you're panicked, you're not in touch with the universe. It's like, but it's kind of like I liken it almost to trading, how like you're supposed to go against whatever you're feeling internally. So like with trading, when you feel like, oh, I better sell, that's when you should buy more. And when you feel like, oh, I'm the smartest person in the world, that's when you should sell. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like with doing that stuff with our emotions, uh, when we're feeling like we need to change, I need to figure out what I need to do with my life, we should take a breath, take a step back, be easier on ourselves, and just be patient. And that's probably the hardest thing to do. It's like it's the advice that I don't want whenever I get it because like whenever I'm in those situations like, oh, I need to do something with my life, and somebody says, yo, just chill, you just need to like get through it, and I'm like, that's not the answer I want. Tell me what to do right now, and I need to figure it out right now. So like the first thing is probably the hardest thing is just, you know, be patient, give yourself some time. And
Well,
also,
oh, sorry. I just want to say, no, I think that's like, that's a really good point too, which is like, the relationship between our mood and our state of mind and our expectations and the change we want. And I think you're right. Like I said yesterday I had a bad day, but I also knew that like if I just took a step back, I'd wake up today, I'd probably feel better, I'd have a better perspective. And I did. And it's just like, sometimes you just have to walk away. You just have to push things away for a day. Give yourself a break. You might have like maybe been working on the problems too much in the back of your mind. Maybe you've been running through things, you haven't really let yourself because you're not seeing things correctly, right? You're not going to make good judgments from that state of mind. It's impossible. And I
mhm,
think that's a great point. Like you have to do it from a healthy place, not a happy, but a healthy place. I think you have to make those sort of decisions.
yeah, and like most of the things we want, if you really look at it, we want them because we think they're going to change our state. Like I want this because I think it'll make me happy. I want that because I think it'll be pleasurable. I want this because I think other people will look up to me when I have that. And so like if we then if we know that the things that we want and the life that we want is really because we think it's going to change our state, well, we could look at it like, well, would I still want this if I already had that state? Like here's a thought experiment. So like let's
I
say
like that.
let's say all of a sudden you think, oh, I really need to be a doctor. And it's like that's the thing that's going to do it.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, well, maybe that will be. But if you were already feeling the things that you thought you would get from being a doctor, like if people were already looking up to you, if you felt financially secure, if you felt really intelligent, or whatever other things you thought were you would get from being a doctor, if you already had that now, would you still want to go through the 8+ years of training and doing clinics where you would get no sleep and having
Watching, yeah,
to.
having patients die on you, the emergency. No, I think that's a great thought experiment because really what it gets down to is not it's you're trying to separate the imagined the imagined end positives from the actual activity, right? To find the right thing. I think that's a brilliant way to look at it, right? Which is if you already had if you were already happy, you already had the stableness, you already had all the other things, is that really what you want to do? And that really gets down to the important question of because anything you choose is going to be hard. Doesn't matter what it is, right? It's going to be difficult. It's going to require education, probably skill sets. It's going to require long hours. So it better be something you want to do, not that you think you're going to get a certain end from. Because I've seen that so many times, even in college. Like I see kids going to school because their parents want them to do something, and it's miserable because it's not really what they want. Not that they don't want an education, but that they don't really want that kind of education, right? They don't want that kind of career. And it's like, they just, it's like, but this expectation that they have to kind of ruins everything, right? And that's a good way. That's a good thought experiment. I like that. Help a
Mhm.
lot of people.
Yeah, so definitely being patient and just outlasting it. Like it'll come and it'll go. Like that's what I was telling my friend when she asked me. I was just like, you just need to outlast this feeling. Like that's basically it. It's a terrible place to be. I've been there a whole bunch. You just need to outlast it because once it passes, like right now there's this giant urge to figure out what to do with my life. Once that passes, then it'll be gone, and it won't be there anymore. And but if you take drastic measures when you have that going on, then you kind of have to do those drastic measures.
Yeah, and I think too on that note too, like I think another important point that you're making is that, these feelings are usually temporary, right? They have a fixed amount of time. And I think that's important to point out because for two reasons. Like one, you can outlast them, and then you can make a better, healthier decision when you're not in that state. Two, if it doesn't end, if it's persistent over a long time, you might also need to get other help. It might be possible that you need to work through some things in order to then move forward, and that's fine. But I think that's a good way to think about it, that these feelings should pass normally. Most of us, it's like almost like an anxiety attack, right? You get in this state where you're like depressed and, oh God, what the hell am I doing? What should I do? Everything seems lost. And oh my God, it sucks. But then when you get through it, you come out on the other side. Yeah, things might not be great, but at least you can start to make conscious decisions that are not panicked, not fear driven, not anxiety driven, and then therefore, hopefully healthy and better, right? I think
Yeah,
another.
and
Oh, go ahead.
that's like a really stoic quality, is just outlasting stuff, like just enduring through it, being patient. and
Yeah.
and like, patience is, we had a whole episode on patience, I believe. It's like super difficult to be patient.
Yeah,
And
it is.
like,
Yeah.
another word for patience is just endurance, enduring through something. And but one thing that's really helpful with patience is perspective. And I think, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience, but like, it seems like nowadays in life we have to prove ourselves so early. Like, if we're not a teenage millionaire, and if we're not a billionaire by the time we're 30, there's something inherently wrong with us. And it's just like, having the perspective that, what, most people actually, and this is a fact from Think and Grow Rich. He studied tons of the most successful people in the world, and most of them didn't even hit their strides until 40 to 60 years old.
Yeah.
And there are countless examples of people who have gotten success even after that. And I think we'll see the age getting older and older as people live longer. So like, having that perspective that, like, you don't need to have your life figured out. Most people don't have their life figured out. Like, if you think that somebody has their life figured out, they're probably just fooling you. And
Yeah,
so
they're
like,
probably
having
faking it.
yeah, so like, having that perspective to give you the patience to just endure through this difficult time that you're going through is really important.
I think also on that note too, I think we so often associate success with money and stuff like that. And we forget too that not everybody, the same life is not good for everybody. Like, you might want financial security, but a really good life for you might be a house out in the country and a family and stability, and financial stability. It doesn't mean you need $1 billion. You don't in that case, right? And if family's important, earning $1 billion is probably going to be pretty counterproductive to that, because you're going to be working 90 hours a week and stuff and doing all. So I think it's important to also understand, like, what do I want? I get all these examples of a good life thrown at me from the outside, and they, especially in the US, they tend to be one flavor mostly, right? Like fame, power, money. That's usually the big three. So it's like, is that really what I want? Is that really going to make my life better? And I think oftentimes it's not. Really, what's going to make your life better is working on yourself and finding out what you really want, because then you can get there and it'll be right for you. It'll be specific. I think another important thing to add to that too is just that we talked about this before, but just change, right? Things change, and you should anticipate change in life. I think, one of the things we get stuck in is we anticipate sort of a static, like you said, right? I'd reach that point and it would stay there and it'd be perfect and it'd be great. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you imagine the end to be. You're still going to be living life. There's still going to be changes. There's still going to be problems. There's still going to be stuff. So being kind of aware of that and understanding that also helps us understand too, I think, that our emotional states, our mental states, they all change. They're all processes. So perspective can help in so many different ways, I think, with that, and understanding, the relationship between change and living.
Yeah, I really like looking at it that way, with change, as like, there are these seasons, you know? And so I know that, just as I know, like, after spring comes summer and after summer comes fall, I also know that, after I'm feeling terrible, I'm going to feel good. And I also know that after feeling good, there's going to be a point when I feel terrible again. But it's
Yeah.
like recognizing that there's seasons to these things, and that like the season of not knowing what to do with your life is a totally awesome season, because right after that comes knowing what you're going to do with your life.
Wait, and it's funny, like Camus said that, right? Like you can't have sun without the dark. Like you can't have, one without the other. We're so often we so often think in terms of fixed things that we forget that everything really is a matter of degree, right? It's a sliding scale from one extreme to the other. And more often than not, what we really want is the middle. We want something in between that suits us, or that's right for us. And that's the hard thing to find. But you're right. I think, when you think of it, I like the season idea, because it kind of gives you that idea of the perpetual changing times, the perpetual changing life, right? That I'm not the same as I was when I was 30. I won't be the same now as I am when I'm 50. And it's like, that's part of it. And that gives me opportunities to work on myself and to get to where I want to be, and to just remember that whatever mental state I'm in, it will change, good or bad. It will fluctuate, and that's okay. It's part of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we covered a lot in this episode. I think we gave
Yeah,
a
it
lot
was
of
fun.
people stuff to chew on mentally. And anything else you'd like to add? What should I do with my life? Overcoming
Oh
existential
man,
despair.
and the existential despair. I mean, I think
I would
one
just
last
say,
thing.
I would,
Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I would
add
just
your
say,
last.
if anybody's truly in despair, reach out to somebody, speak with a counselor, speak with a friend, family member, someone you love, call suicide prevention hotline. Because, like I said, it is seasons, and it doesn't feel like seasons when you're in the worst of seasons, but it is seasons, and there's lots of people to help, but you need to reach out. We can't read your minds. So that's what I would say.
It's funny. I was just going to say something along those lines. So that's good. The other
Mhm.
thing, yeah, and the other thing I guess I would add too is, like, with that is that, you know, just be careful and take your time. I think that's probably some of the best advice, is that, we when we feel like we have to make decisions, we rush. If you just take your time and slow down, they do get better. It makes it easier to make a decision. Oh no, did I lose you at the end there, buddy? Shit.
No, no, no. I'm still here. I can still hear you.
Oh, good. Okay,
I
good.
think I
Whew.
think that is some of the best advice. Slowing down, taking your time, uh, because it's rushing into decisions that get us into trouble, and it's so hard to um, slow down, because I know I've experienced this. When you're uncomfortable, like when you're in that spot, what should I do with my life? I'm uncomfortable. You're looking for anything. You're grasping for straws, and like trying to get
Anything to get you
anything.
out of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's oftentimes not the best option.
No, it very rarely
Mhm.
is. And yet, I think and that's what's difficult, right? And I think, we're all there. We're all going to be there. And I think it's just trying our best to be the person we want to be. That's a challenge in life. We got to accept it and just go with it, right?
Definitely. Cool.
Yeah.
So I think that's great way to end it there with a little mic drop. There you go, Danny.
There you go.
Uh,
Yeah.
but thank you so much for joining us for episode 35 of the Existential
Yeah.
Stoic podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, join us on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting service. Listen every single day. And yeah, but all that fun stuff.
All
We
that
really
stuff.
do appreciate growing with you guys. It's a lot of fun. Making this content is awesome for me and Danny, but we also love being able to have you guys come along with us for the ride. So we will see you later in the week with a short little quick fix. But thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Later, Danny.
Later, Andy.
Cool.